Maybe you've noticed this too. People feeling harder to reach now. Not physically or socially. You can still text them. You still see their faces. You can still watch their lives go by in little squares and circles. Meals and birthdays and opinions and vacations and vague emotional posts written just clearly enough to imply pain, but not clearly enough to explain anything. Everybody is technically available, everybody's right there. And somehow people feel farther away than they used to. That's the strange thing. The phone's in your hand. The message says delivered. Little typing bubbles can appear and vanish and appear again. And a person can be online and visible and active and posting and reacting and moving through the world right in front of you, and still it can feel like trying to speak to someone through a wall. Maybe that's why you clicked on this video tonight. Maybe there's someone you can't quite reach anymore. Maybe it's not even one person. Maybe it's everyone. Maybe it's the whole atmosphere between human beings. Something's thinning out. Something's becoming more guarded. Conversations still happen, but a lot of them feel like they never fully land. Like everyone is speaking from behind glass. Like everyone's tired in a way that they're just not admitting to. Like the world got louder and people became quieter inside of it. I don't know where you're listening from tonight. Maybe you're in bed, scrolling even though you told yourself you'd stop 20 minutes ago. Maybe you're in your car outside the house, just sitting there for a minute before going in. Maybe you're alone in a room. It's not silent exactly. There's always some machine humming now, some appliance, some fan, some little electric witness. But if you're still here, there is probably a reason. In a world full of noise, trust the signal. If you're hearing this, you've already found it. This is Dove and Serpent Radio. There's a loneliness that comes from having no one. Then there is a stranger loneliness that comes from having people, but not feeling met by them. That second kind can be a little harder to explain. Because on paper, you're not alone. There are names in your phone. There are people who would probably answer if you needed something. There are people who know facts about your life. There are group chats and family threads and coworkers and neighbors and old friends and people you used to know better than you know them now. So when the loneliness comes, it feels almost inappropriate, right? You think, I shouldn't feel this way. I've got people. Yeah, maybe you do. But there's a difference between being contacted and being reached. There's a difference between being seen and being known. There's a difference between someone replying and someone actually entering the room of your life for a moment and standing there with you honestly. That has become more rare, I think. Not because people are worse. I don't really believe that. I think people are overwhelmed. I think people are overstimulated, overmanaged, overexposed, overmarketed to, overmeasured, and underheld. I think people are carrying more invisible noise than they know what to do with. And when a person's carrying too much noise, they start to protect the small, quiet space they have left. They answer less. They listen only halfway. They disappear without meaning to. They become very polite ghosts. You know what I mean. You send a message and the reply comes back, but something's missing. You're talking to someone, right? They're saying all the right words, but you can feel their attention slipping sideways. You sit across from somebody and their body is there. Their voice is there, their face and everything, but something essential is not fully present. And you don't want to accuse them because guess what? You do it too. We all do. You find yourself nodding while thinking about something else. You read a message and you plan on answering it later, and then later becomes 3 days, and 3 days becomes kind of awkward. And then awkward becomes silence. You mean well. Most people mean well. That's the sad part, right? The distance is not cruelty. It's just, it's exhaustion. It's too much life. It's the nervous system saying, I can't hold not one more thing. There was a time, not long ago, when distance had a shape. If someone was far away, they were far away. You wrote a letter, you waited, right? You imagined them in another town, another room, another climate. Absence had dignity, it had weather around it, had a proper ache. Now absence has become strange. Someone can be missing while still posting, right? Someone can disappear while still being visible. Someone can ignore you while broadcasting themselves to hundreds or thousands of people. Someone can be present everywhere except with you. And that is a very modern kind of pain. And because it's modern, we don't have the old rituals for it. There's no morning custom for being left on read. There's no candle for you to light. For a friendship that didn't end, but just slowly lost its pulse. There's no funeral for conversations that become smaller and smaller and smaller until they could pass through a keyhole. So we just carry these tiny ghosts around. The old friend who used to know your whole interior weather. The family member you can't really talk to anymore without both of you becoming careful. The person who once made you feel understood and now makes you feel like a file they forgot how to open. The version of someone you miss, even though the person's still alive. And that last one is very difficult. Missing someone who still exists. Missing a closeness that has no official death certificate. I came across a strange little story about a town that had been flooded to create a reservoir. That happens sometimes, I guess, right? Whole places just submerged in the name of progress for water or for power or, something larger than the homes that used to stand there. Streets, churches, graveyards, kitchens, bedrooms, sidewalks, all underwater. And supposedly, when the water level dropped, right, during droughts and things, parts of the old town would reappear. The top of a church steeple, or like a stone wall, a road leading nowhere. Maybe people would walk along the edge and stare at the bones of the place that used to be there. I don't know why that image stayed with me. Maybe because, some relationships are like that. They don't vanish all at once. They go underwater. The old town still down there somewhere. The old jokes, the late night honesty, the understanding, the version of you that existed in that connection and the version of them that could meet you there. But most days, all you see is the surface, flat water, reflection, nothing to walk on. Then something happens. A dream, a song, a message, an old photo, a certain kind of weather, and the water drops for a minute, and there it is. A roof line, a road, a shape you thought was gone. And you remember how close you used to be to somebody. And then the water rises again. Could be nothing. Could just be the memory doing what memory does. But memory is one of the few forces left that can still reveal what the surface hides. There's something eerie about how easily people disappear now without leaving. They don't have to move away. They don't have to say goodbye. They don't even really have to stop interacting. They just simply become less available internally, right? A little colder, a little more distracted, a little more curated, a little bit more armored. Because everyone is doing this to some degree, it's totally normal. We become accustomed to partial presence. We learn to accept fragments, half attention, half truth, half intimacy, half listening, half asked. And then when someone actually pays attention, it feels almost shocking. Have you noticed that? Have you noticed how powerful it is when someone is really listening now? Not just not waiting for their turn to respond, or not glancing at their phone, not turning your sentence into a story about them, not trying to fix you, just there, quiet, receiving. It feels sacred. And I don't use that word lightly. Full attention has become rare enough that it feels like a form of love. Hey, maybe it always was. Maybe we're only noticing it now because we're starved for it. The modern world has confused visibility with intimacy. You can know the surface of a person's life in exhausting detail and still not know what they're afraid to say out loud. You can see someone every day online and have no idea what their mornings feel like. You can know their opinions and not know their grief. You can know their aesthetic or their vibes and not know their soul. And that creates a very strange illusion. It makes us feel like we're surrounded by people while remaining fundamentally untouched. And being untouched over time changes a person. They become a little less willing to reach, a little more self-contained, a little more ironic about tenderness, and a little more suspicious of sincerity. We learn to speak in ways that can't be rejected too deeply, because nothing too deep is being offered. Jokes, memes, reactions, short answers, sarcasm, silence. Maybe the safest thing is to become difficult to reach before anyone else fails to reach you. I wonder how many distant people are actually wounded people who got tired of feeling foolish for wanting depth. And I gotta tell you, that thought bothers me because it makes the distance more sad. It means the coldness we feel from others may not always be emptiness. It's protection. Sometimes behind the wall is not indifference. Behind the wall is someone who once reached honestly and found nothing there. Maybe you've been that person. Maybe you're that person now. Maybe part of you wants connection badly. Another part of you flinches when it approaches. You want to be known, but you don't want to be mishandled. You want someone to ask the real question, don't you? But you're afraid you wouldn't know how to answer if they did. You want closeness, don't you? But closeness requires being interruptible. Modern life trains us to be constantly accessible while rarely interruptible in the deeper sense. Accessible, right, means people can contact you. Interruptible means they can matter to you. And those aren't the same thing. A notification can reach your device. A voice has to reach your being. Maybe that's where the signal comes in. Because most of what reaches us now is not signal. It's noise wearing the mask of urgency. Breaking news that breaks nothing except your peace. Messages that require response but not presence. Content that stimulates the eye and leaves the soul unfed. Arguments that produce heat but no light. Advertisements disguised as aspiration. Aspiration disguised as identity. Identity disguised as freedom. And it's a lot. And in all that, the real signals become quieter. A person saying, I miss you. Or, I'm not doing well. A person saying, do you ever feel like you're changing, but nobody notices? A person saying nothing at all, but lingering for one extra second because they don't want to leave yet. We miss these things sometimes, not because we're bad, because our receptors are exhausted. There's this deep ocean creature. I can't remember which one exactly. Maybe it's a fish or a squid or something. It lives so far down that light barely means what it means to us. Down there, attention works differently. Movement matters. Pressure matters. Faint flashes matter. Tiny disturbances in the dark become information. I think some human relationships have gone deep sea, right? Surface communication is too bright, too noisy, too crowded. The real thing is lower, down in the pressure and in the silence, in what is not said, in the slight delay before someone answers, in the way a person's voice changes when they're trying not to cry, in the careful sentence that is really asking, are you still there? You have to listen differently for that. You can't listen with the scrolling mind. You can't hear deep signals while you're skimming the surface. And maybe that's why so many people feel unseen. Not because they never speak, but because they speak in frequencies no one around them is tuned to receive. And they say, I'm tired. What they mean is, I don't know how much longer I can keep being this version of myself. Or they say, things have been weird lately. What they mean is, reality feels slightly artificial, and I'm afraid I'm the only one who notices. Or they say, I've just been busy. But what they mean is, I am disappearing into obligations, and I don't know how to ask someone to pull me back. Or they say, it's fine. What they really mean, please hear the part of me that cannot say more yet. Maybe you needed someone else to say it first, so I will say it softly. People are not only distant because they don't care. People are distant because they're tired. They're defended. They're overstimulated and lonely. They're ashamed of needing more than the world seems willing to give. Because intimacy has become both desired and frightening. Real attention now feels almost too vulnerable to ask for. I was thinking about old radio signals again tonight. There's something beautiful about the idea of a voice going out into darkness without knowing who's going to receive it. A small station somewhere, a tower blinking red, a room with bad carpet and a coffee cup on the desk. Someone speaking into a microphone at an hour when most of the town is asleep. And they don't know who's listening. A truck driver, a night nurse, a teenager with insomnia, an old man in a kitchen, a woman parked near a lake because she just doesn't want to go home yet. The voice travels anyway through static and weather and distance. There's faith in that, almost religious faith, really. A human faith. A faith that somewhere, someone is awake. Somewhere, someone needs a voice. Somewhere, someone is tuning the dial slowly, trying to find something that does not sound dead. That's what I think people are doing emotionally now, tuning, scanning, moving through static, trying to find a person, a place, a sentence, a memory, a signal that feels alive. And when they can't find it, they just go numb. They scroll, they work, they buy things. They sleep poorly. They become more efficient. They become funny. They become hard to read. They become distant. And maybe the distance is not the final truth. Maybe it's the static between stations. And that's a more gentle thought. That the people who feel far away are not always gone. Some of them are lost in interference. Some of them can't hear themselves either. Some of them are trying to find their way back, but the noise is thick. Maybe you're trying to find your way back too. Back to what? I don't know. Not the past. The past is tempting, but it's not home. It's a museum with unreliable lighting. Maybe back to the part of you that could feel without immediately translating feeling into content or performance or explanation or defense. Back to the part of you that could sit with another person and let silence be alive instead of awkward. Back to the part of you that believed conversation could change the texture of a night. Back to the part of you that still wants to be known, even after all the disappointments. That part's not foolish. It's not weak. It's probably one of the most intact things in you. There's a reason childhood friendships feel so mythic in memory. Not because they're perfect, they weren't. Children can be cruel and confused and strange, right? But there was often a kind of immediacy. You were there. The other person was there. The world was smaller and more solid. A bedroom floor could become a kingdom. A backyard could become wilderness. A summer evening could stretch forever. You didn't need to schedule your soul 3 weeks in advance. You just showed up. Maybe that's what we miss. Not childhood itself, but presence without negotiation. Closeness without branding. time that was not constantly harvested by something? When did time become so thin? When did a whole week begin to feel like a notification you accidentally cleared? When did conversations become something we squeeze between tasks instead of something that could become the center of the evening? I don't know. Maybe this is just me getting older. Maybe every generation says the same thing in its own way. I think people have always mourned the loss of depth while participating in the machinery that replaces it. But it does feel specific now, right? It feels like human beings are being asked to live at a speed that makes intimacy difficult. Real connection requires slowness, friction, pauses. It requires the possibility that a conversation might go somewhere nobody planned. But everything now is optimized. Speed, convenience, response time, watch time, engagement, productivity. Even vulnerability has become optimized in some places, packaged into captions, turned into personal brand texture, and made consumable. And yet real vulnerability is awkward. It doesn't have good lighting. It doesn't always know the right words. It repeats itself. It trails off. It says, I don't know why I'm telling you this. And it cries at the wrong part. It laughs because the alternative is too much. It changes the room. That kind of thing cannot be optimized without being injured. That's why people retreat. Some private part of them knows the world is always trying to turn their inner life into material. So, hey, we hide the real thing. Give the world a version. A manageable self. A self with the edges rounded off, right? And then we wonder why nobody knows us. It's because our true signal was never transmitted. Or it was once, and then someone mishandled it. Or like we're walking around with signal injuries. Moments when we tried to send something real and it came back distorted. A confession turned into gossip. Vulnerability turned into leverage. A real need turned into inconvenience. A dream that somebody turned into a joke. After a while, you learn to send less, right? And people call you distant. They're not wrong all the way, I guess, but they don't know the history of the distance. They don't know what it cost you to become hard to reach. You already understand this. Because if you've felt people becoming more distant, you've probably also felt yourself becoming harder to reach in certain ways. Not with everybody, with some people, with some rooms, with some parts of life. You can feel it. But it's lonely, right? The more skillful you become at performing presence, the easier it becomes for others to miss your absence. They see you smiling and they think you're there. They hear you answering and they think you're open. They watch you function and they think you're fine. But some part of you is standing outside in the dark, looking in through the window, right? The self outside the lit house, the room full of people, the version of you inside saying the right things, but the real part of you outside, cold but awake, wondering when someone will notice. Maybe no one notices, because they're outside their own houses too. Maybe everyone is haunting their own life a little bit. I think that's what happens to us all the time now. I feel like we're constantly receiving fragments of other people's inner weather, but not enough context to understand it. A post, a tone, silence, a strange look. We pick it up, we absorb it, we make stories about it, and we carry it. And we feel tired. We're not just living our own lives, we're receiving interference from hundreds of others. But a voice at 2:17 in the morning makes the room feel a little less empty. We are sold endless substitutes for what we need. And the human heart remains inconvenient. It still wants presence, it still wants witness, it still wants to be answered by something alive. We want that feeling that another person is actually with us. We want someone to look through the fog and say, "There you are." Maybe that's what this whole broadcast is trying to be in its own strange little way. A voice in the dark saying, "Hey, there you are." Not loudly or perfectly, but just enough. Enough that if you're listening alone tonight, you remember that the distance is not the whole story. Until next time, stay strange in the silence, and keep the dial somewhere between wonder and understanding.